Hello and welcome to Family Focus. I'm your host, Christina O'Reilly with Family Service Association of Fall River. We are thrilled as always to present this program as a resource to strengthen individuals and families throughout southeastern Massachusetts. We come to you on more than a dozen broadcast partner stations, and we always like to thank them. And of course, this and other episodes are always available on our YouTube channel, which is FSA Fall River. I'm joined here today by Ben Machado, who is an in-home therapy clinician with Family Service Association. Ben, thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
So today we're here to share with our viewers a little bit about the FSA in-home therapy program, and also to talk more specifically about the season that we are rushing headlong into right now, the holiday season, and all the kind of exciting and good things that can come of that, but also a lot of the stressors that come along with that holiday season.
Absolutely, yes.
So Ben, why don't you start us off by telling a little bit about your background as a behavioral health clinician and how IHT works with children and their families to improve communication and function in the home. So first, what enticed you personally to go into behavioral health?
Well, I've been working in behavioral health for going on 14 years now. 10 years upcoming with family services actually, and all in the in-home therapy department. And in-home therapy focuses more on meeting families where they're at to begin with. Goals are generally focused around improving family communication, parent-child dynamics, boundaries inside the home. And generally we have a client between the age of 3 and 21 who we have as our identified client. And we work with him or her in the home along with the family as well. A lot of sibling work. A lot of play therapy, playing games, improving communication, working on emotional regulation, decreasing family stress, especially around the holidays, that's a big thing, and things of that nature. And like I mentioned, we tend to meet the family where they're at, and generally it's a lot of social emotional challenges going on which elevate the family stress inside the home. And then prior to that, I actually worked in Rhode Island, in Providence for a while, working with social emotional adults within their needs.
Interesting. So yeah, a lot of people think of a therapist relationship as kind of a one-on-one, come in, sit on a couch, or these days telemed. So it's really interesting. Can you elaborate a little more? You actually go into the homes and create plans with families to basically to help them help themselves to evolve their family dynamic?
The program in-home therapy is exactly how it sounds, going inside the home. It's essentially family work. I know I mentioned previously we have the identified client between the ages of 3 and 21, but we work with the family as a whole. Sessions could be anywhere from inside the home, going in the community, meeting them at a park. I've had sessions at swim meets, basketball games. Generally, it's inside the home, but oftentimes sessions can be pretty intense and triggers can go on, and kids kind of need a break, so we might go for a walk in the community or a quick ride, maybe to the park or to the basketball court to shoot some hoops, things like that. Like I mentioned, a general theme we have is just meeting the family where they're at and however we can support their needs.
Terrific. So we'll turn now to our holiday topic. We all know holidays can be a bit of a roller coaster. You know, hopefully we have a lot of fun and anticipation and festivities, but they can also be really fraught with things that might be ongoing sort of under the surface issues that end up bubbling up at the holidays. You know, some of the things are obvious, like money worries or family dynamics, and others can be more subtle, like time management and just, completely overwhelming yourself. So let's talk a little bit about some of those stressors and how we can effectively manage them.
Okay. Well, stresses, just like we talked about, are environmental in a sense, and especially tend to increase around the holidays. From an in-home therapy standpoint, what we try to focus on a lot is maintaining safety inside the home. A lot of our families, the stress levels can elevate, causing at-risk factors, behaviors, elevated emotional responses from the kids. So a lot of the stuff we do is around safety planning and trying to plan ahead and develop skills around parenting and safety inside the home that can help with that. Around the holidays, I know it's very challenging for families. I mean, we all experience the challenges, financial difficulties, whether it's transportation, other things, like I mentioned, environmental type stuff that get in the way. A lot of the stuff we talk about is just trying to plan ahead, trying to budget. Oftentimes I'll suggest to parents to help the kids prioritize things on their Christmas list. That ensures that, Santa finds them and they get everything they want and they're not let down on Christmas morning, adding to potentially, more parental and family stress inside the home around the holidays. doing it with them is a big thing. Prioritizing and then budgeting, like what's realistic, right? What can we afford? What can we do? What can we not do? And all of those things, it's tough. It's tough. We all acknowledge that stress is there and it's around us all the time, and it's how we manage it, right? It's how we respond.
Yeah. That's an excellent point you raise about kids and kind of managing their expectations, because whether unwittingly or not, we set up,
Yes.
Santa's going to bring X, Y, and Z, and we all know that every kid deals with a different socioeconomic status, and so you've got kids in school who are getting bigger and fancier gifts, and then some kids who might get basics at home. And it's hard for families to navigate that sometimes, especially when the child really thinks that this doesn't cost mom and dad anything.
Yes.
So,
Well,
working through.
And having said that too, I think that one of the things, like I mentioned, in terms of treatment planning goals that we come up with from in-home therapy is family communication. And I think that when you have family systems from different socioeconomic backgrounds, having those open lines of communication with the kids is important, because they're able to process and better understand what's going on in their environment. Situations like you said, like peers at school are getting this gift, I didn't get this. But if they have an understanding of where the family background and where they're coming from, they're better able to cope, manage, and ultimately understand what it is that's unfolding around them.
I've heard, just kind of circulating this suggestion that shouldn't we all as parents kind of let Santa do some of the basics that more people can do, and let those bells and whistles kind of gifts come from parents if they can afford to do so.
Yeah.
It would be an ideal world if we could all kind of get on the same page.
It certainly would, yeah.
Save a lot of strain on our kids. So, we talked a little about money. Let's talk about family dynamics. Maybe going beyond the household unit that you work with, extended family can really, they literally do start inundating during
Yes.
the holiday season. People who you might only see a few times a year, you start seeing, and dynamics can be uncomfortable sometimes. And so, what is it about the holiday season that sort of amplifies all those things, and how can we deal with that?
Well, I think speaking with a lot of the families we work with, when it comes to their calendar, they're very reactive in nature. That's why I mentioned before, I encourage them to plan ahead, use a calendar. What days of the week are these parties falling on? All of a suddenly we have 2 gatherings on Saturday, December 10th. That's not realistic. We can't do all this. So again, planning ahead, having a calendar that you can use as a reference for the whole family to kind of refer back to. That's very, very important around this time of year. And it's a better way to just decrease stress. Everyone's on the same page. Again, communication is open to the best of your ability. Things are going to get in the way. Kids aren't going to like responses. That's part of the family dynamic, the family system at work. But it is important to have that open communication and planning ahead. I can't stress that enough.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about sort of multi-generational situations, or bringing, other family units together with some of the families that you're working with. So obviously, your clients are working to create a healthier dynamic within
Yes.
their own families and households. And all of a sudden, you might be bringing in, say, like an aunt, an uncle, cousins, where the dynamics function very differently. And how do you advise families to get through that, where one set of children they see being treated very different, maybe much more leniently, and kids running amok, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
Whereas your family client is really working to sort of tighten the circle and better the communication.
One of the big things we talk about both in family sessions, then also separately with kids, of all wide-ranging ages, is it's okay to normalize the feelings and normalize the response, the thoughts, the emotions, acknowledge them, process them, discuss them. Oftentimes with kids, I'll say it's okay to get mad. It's okay to be upset, jealous even, but it's all a matter of how you handle yourself, how you cope, and how you're able to ultimately regulate yourself. And then that also trickles down to extended family, right? When they're coming in, and that's adding stress. Different dynamics are at play, relationships, history of relationships, both positive, negative. You've got triggers, stressors, and again, acknowledging it. And then as an immediate family, processing, understanding it, discussing, okay, Johnny doesn't get along with this cousin very well. We might need to keep their distance a little bit and safety plan, not safety plan so much, but at least plan ahead, come up with an idea of what are we going to do if the train kind of goes off the tracks a little bit and there's a disagreement, whether it's over a toy, a gift, or an activity that they're playing. And a lot of the dynamics are age appropriate, but it's always good to just plan ahead and ultimately try to understand what's coming next as best you can.
Talk to me a little bit about kind of setting healthy boundaries. I'm sure many of the families that you work with are trying to break a generational cycle. And so when you have a grandparent, say, coming into the home who has raised their now adult child very differently, and that adult child is trying to do different and do better by their own, any thoughts on sort of respectfully cutting off grandma or grandpa where they are?
And when we talked about normalizing things, like that's a very normal family dynamic that everyone at some point, for the most part, goes through, right? Trying to keep everyone happy. And it's a challenge, especially when you have younger kids now. And it's okay to say no and plan ahead and try to manage your time accordingly. What's realistic? Can we do this? Can we not do this? And you always, especially with younger kids, I mean, for myself, I have 2 girls, 4 and 7, and they need free play. They need downtime. They need time to kind of reset their batteries, whether it's a movie on the couch, whether it's for my girls playing with their Barbie toys, or Barbie dolls, I should say. And they need that free play to kind of to reset their batteries, like I mentioned. And having those dialogues with family members and saying, hey, listen, like this is where little Johnny's at right now. Like he's going to need a couple hours. Like we need to kind of just calm down, and then maybe we can come later on in the evening or something like that. But again, just being forthcoming with information, communicating to the best of your ability. And again, it's okay to say no and put yourself out there and discuss what it is you need and what your family needs for the most part, especially your kids.
Yeah, and I think too, even, we see a lot of like an older generation might have a children should be seen and not heard kind of mentality.
Very much so.
Maybe younger parents are trying to let their kids be kids. And, so that creates tension between the grandparent and the parent. I would have never let that happen. You kids never did this.
Yeah.
And, it's so sort of the adult child ends up managing up to their own parent.
They try to, right? And the other thing too is having that free play, that downtime when it's constant transition for kids. They got to be here, then they got to be there, then we'll fit in lunch, then they'll go here, then they got to be there for dinner, and then we're also going here for dessert. That adds up. That leads to tantrums. That leads to emotional responses, elevated emotional responses, I should say, poor listening, dysregulation. Then all of a sudden now maybe you got to transition to bedtime. Now the kids they're just overstimulated. They can't regulate themselves. Transition and change is a skill that they learn as they're evolving, and you need to support that and manage it and coach it along the way. And it's very important to put your kids first in some situations like that. Yeah.
And then letting them have their own space and time can help them better meet the expectations of that grandparent.
And if other family members are, let's say, unaccepting of that feedback, obviously that can lead to stress. And a lot of times parents are worried about what their mother's response might be in that certain situation. But ultimately it's putting the kids first and your family first and your needs. And like I mentioned at the start, like it's okay to say no and plan ahead.
Yeah. So turning to that, talking a little bit about kind of putting your own needs first. So, we as adults tend to absorb and, just take on a lot of the holiday stress. And let's talk a little bit about, stepping outside of the kid perspective. How can adults sort of practice better self-care to get themselves through this holiday season?
Self-care is huge, isn't it? Especially around the holidays. But again, acknowledging what's my trigger? What sets me off? What tends to, get in the way of time management, so to speak, and planning ahead. If there's activities, if there's expectations around cooking, gift wrapping, being here a certain time, maintaining a certain family ritual around the holidays. It's important to acknowledge those triggers and what stresses me as a parent, as an individual, right? And then other healthy habits to manage that is exercise, eating healthy. It can be a challenge around the holidays to not only eat healthy but get enough sleep, right? From a parenting standpoint, if you mix in Christmas drinks and alcohol around the holidays, that can add to stress and get in the way of your sleep. Self-care is just a big thing that everybody needs to be mindful of, and find out what works best for you in that moment. Whether you enjoy exercising, whether you enjoy socializing with friends, whether it's in person or over the phone, going for a walk. Things like that. Identify what works for you, and then use it. Rely on it, and have that in place when you're stressed and triggered. Yeah,
having a network maybe outside of your own family unit, a friend who you can relate to, who you can text and just
a healthy line of communication. Right? Absolutely, yeah. Just to express yourself and kind of problem solve, bounce ideas off of. That's a big thing we work with the families in in-home therapy is problem solving. Everything comes down to trying to resolve conflicts, identify problem solving skills, things of that nature, just to decrease the stress around the house.
Great. So with that, we're going to turn briefly to a break, and then we'll come back and continue our conversation.
All right, very good.
IHT is a structured, strength-based, collaborative, therapeutic relationship between a clinical team and a youth and his or her family for the purpose of treating the youth's behavioral health needs in a manner consistent with wraparound principles. This service is appropriate when outpatient counseling is not able to meet the needs of the child and family. The Behavioral Health Center is one of FSA's long-standing programs, speaking to the organization's reputation for providing high-quality outpatient mental health services in a respectful, responsive, and effective manner. The BHC has been licensed by the Massachusetts Department of Public Health since 1985 and has continually provided services from the same location.
Welcome back to Family Focus. I'm Christina O'Reilly. I'm here today with Ben Machado, an in-home therapy clinician from Family Service Association. And we're talking today about some of the holiday stress and triggers that, can affect us all at this time of year, and healthy ways of managing and coping with them, both for your children, for yourself, for multiple generations coming together. And so thank you again, Ben, for being here today. So we were just talking a little bit before the break about self-care, and I do want to sort of delve a little more into what might somebody look out for, knowing their own sort of early warning signs of stress, whether it be headaches or tension or stomach upset. What kind of what are the cues that people can look for to say, hey, I need to step back a minute here and take
absolutely.
better care of myself.
It's tough to reflect on that, right, in the moment. But a lot of the stuff I work with the parents we're working with is just discussing what we call somatic complaints, right, whether it's headaches, fatigue, body tension, stress. You can feel the stress often. Things like that are individual warning signs and cues that you can kind of pick on, like, all right, maybe I need to take a break here. Maybe the parenting language you're using, like we all get stressed around the holidays, might elevate the language used when parenting with the kids. That's generally a cue. But it's also important to rely on others inside the house. Like with the safety planning work that we do as in-home therapy clinicians, a lot of it we encourage, like, okay, like little Johnny over here, like you notice he clenched his fist or his face is getting red, or he's staring at the ground. He's very avoidant with the eye contact. Like those are just ideas and kind of cues and warning signs that we throw out there. Just to, again, be mindful that, stress is coming, stress is here. How are we responding to it, and how are we managing it as a family system?
Yeah. And reading those cues both in your children and in yourself can be so important, kind of getting ahead of it and mitigating that stress. Absolutely,
and having that open communication like we mentioned earlier, it's like, okay, I noticed that you're avoidant, you're a little guarded here, you're staring at the ground, you're not listening to me, things like that. Why don't we take a break? Why don't you go, do some Legos or whatever it is as a coping strategy for that child. It's important to have that communication open to acknowledge it and hopefully have them respond to it.
Great. We mentioned a little bit about kind of, sharing the load of the holiday season. And so, oftentimes we run into situations where, maybe it's one adult child in the family who's kind of carrying the load for everybody else. They're always the ones to end up hosting. They start to feel like the burden is being unfairly put on them to make the holidays great for everybody else. And so talk a little bit about open communication, between adult siblings or adult children and their parents, about sharing that responsibility and, making sure that everybody's kind of contributing more evenly. Or maybe it's even within the household. Maybe one spouse feels that they are taking on a great degree of the burden.
Yeah, and I think it's different for every family, right? And depending on how open that line of communication is. But certainly for your own self-care, it doesn't hurt to kind of put that out there. Whether it's face-to-face dialogue, whether it's journaling or in an email or whatever form of communication you'd like to utilize, whatever works best for you guys. But I think decreasing expectations when we're talking about hosting and what's on the menu and what are we serving, this, that, and the other thing, I think decreasing the expectations And what works for you as the host or hostess? Like, what's realistic? Can I make this? Can I make that? Is this dish one too many? It's tough to keep everyone happy around the holidays, and be acknowledging of that, accepting of that this isn't going to work for everybody, but it works for us and it works for my family. And if it can meet other people's expectations, if they want to attend, great. If not, this is what we have to do, this time of year for our family.
Just in a practical sense, there are so many tools out there now. Like there's even these, quick online kind of sign-up tools that you can use to say, all right, I'm hosting, so I'm going to provide the main dish and one side, and I need you to sign up for either a side or a dessert. Everybody's going to contribute something.
Yeah. A text thread, right? Something simple like that.
Yeah,
like, I'm bringing this,
Group
you're bringing
text.
this. No, we have too many desserts, right? Group text.
Yeah.
Again, open lines of communication, right?
Yeah.
That to the best of everyone's ability, it decreases everyone's stress.
It almost feels like Thanksgiving can be a practice run for the Christmas and Hanukkah and everything that comes after, because then there's gifts involved and all another layer of expectations there. So if you can get the meal stuff sorted out at Thanksgiving, maybe you can carry that with you into the other holidays. Let's talk a little bit about coping in the moment. So even with the best self-care and planning ahead, we might all find ourselves in some unpleasant situation. Some relative starts steering a conversation in a direction that's a trigger for you. Maybe, again, we talked about, the adult children who you're working with who are now parents, trying to break those cycles. If they're the grandparent in the situation, their parents start speaking to them in a way that they find inappropriate, or start speaking to their child in a way that is not fitting with their current family dynamic. How do you intervene, intercede, or do you just walk away in that kind of situation?
I think each situation probably each situation is different, right? And one of the things from an integral therapy family treatment standpoint is stressing parent-child boundaries and making sure that you're not their peer, you're their parent, and they look to you for structure, consistency, routine, and ultimately safety, right? They want to know what's coming next. They want to plan ahead, so to speak. I know it's been a common term thrown around, but and just maintaining those boundaries in the moment. If communication's poor, if grandma's saying something to the grandchild or whatever the dynamic is at play, it's okay to, as a parent, to intervene and say, I don't think this is the time and place for this discussion, or I don't think this situation warrants that response. Maybe we can talk about it later. If you have to just get up and leave the room to diffuse the situation, that's a practical means to improving the situation. But boundaries is so important. You don't want kids exposed to things that just aren't healthy for them and cause internal distress for them, right? Because they really struggle with, not struggle, but it's an underdeveloped skill or an undeveloped skill around self-expression, right? So they see things, they visualize it, and they internalize it. They don't ask questions right away. They don't tell mom and dad how that made them feel around the holidays, but that doesn't mean that they didn't see it, forget it, and acknowledge it, right? They still have it. And if there is situations that arise that kind of unfold how like we're talking about with disagreements and tension around the holidays, it's okay to kind of check in with your child, maybe on the car ride home or after the guests leave if they're in their house, but going to a safe place in their room and maybe trying to process it. Say, hey, what do you think about that? Do you understand that? Do you have any questions, right? Encourage them to express themselves. It'll improve self-confidence, self-esteem. There's so much skill acquisition that can go around having those healthy discussions with your kids.
Great. So you mentioned, exposure of kids to things that may feel unsafe to them. And you'd mentioned earlier a little bit about having a drink or two. Substance abuse obviously can be triggered around the holidays. So whether you have, a friend or family member or household member who is either sort of towing that line of, use going into abuse, or if you are, have a person who's trying to maintain sobriety. Let's talk a little bit about, what are these, why are the holidays so inherently triggering to those types of
The holidays
habits?
Is just such a big trigger, right? We think about all the family, especially if we're talking about family and loved ones that have passed. You're thinking about all the fun holidays you had, all the events, the customs, the rituals, the activities you did. There's a lot of substance abuse triggers that exist, a lot of forms of relapse, if you will. And it's important too to check in on family members, even friends. If people you don't necessarily see around the holidays, but that they they tend to have a difficult time, or they might be coming up on the anniversary of a passing of a loved one, whether it's 1 year or 20 years, right? Oftentimes those emotions don't leave. And it's important to just check in, like let them know they're not alone, right? They might not have the courage, not so much the courage, but they might be a little bit more guarded in reaching out for help and acknowledging that, you know, they're having a problem or have had a problem, and check in with them. You know, again, normalize that thought, feeling, and emotion that it's okay, and you know, lend some help. If you need a call, let me know. You know, text message, email, whatever the form of communication is. You know, let them know that there's someone out there checking in on them.
Yeah. And, you know, certainly as a host, we want to remind everybody, you know, really watch what's happening in your home. Take keys if you need to, call an Uber, give somebody a ride home.
Absolutely.
Can't emphasize that enough heading into the holidays, just keeping everybody safe.
Yeah. It's a very difficult time around the holidays, both with substance abuse, stress. Stress leads to substance abuse, right? That's one of the forms of relapse and triggers. So it is important, again, just check in, acknowledge what's going on, and be open-minded, right? Be open-minded, encourage that person, because they might not have the ability or the self-confidence to reach out and seek out help, right? It's important to check in.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd say that's pretty much the theme is, you know, checking in with yourself, make sure you're well and maintaining self-care, check in with your children, and check in with your loved ones. Try and make sure everybody has the happiest and healthiest holiday season
Absolutely,
possible.
and in no particular order, but don't forget about yourself. That's priority number one.
Yeah.
You know, because your stress levels then go into your relationships, your parenting, the language used, like we discussed. So it's important to take care of yourself. Putting
on that oxygen mask for yourself first.
Very much, yes. Yeah. Be mindful of you.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, thank you, Ben. It's been a terrific conversation, and hopefully our viewers will have taken away some great tips from this discussion. And so, you know, we at Family Service Association wish all of you a happy and healthy holiday season, and we will see you in the new year. Thank you.